Whatever you choose to be a great one. An inspiring quote by Abraham Lincoln.
We can both remember when Brian decided to run for an FFA state office. He always told both of us how much the FFA meant to him and his desire to give back to the organization that had given him so much.
Brian's friends and family knew that he would make an outstanding Kentucky FFA state officer. But when he interviewed at the regional level the first time, Brian didn't know that his journey was just beginning.
His first attempt to become a Kentucky FFA state officer was unsuccessful. Brian wasn't selected to represent the Lincolnshire region at state convention the summer of 2012.
However, Brian was determined to succeed, and he prevailed. He spent the next year developing his knowledge of the FFA and perfecting his interviewing techniques.
That next year at regional interviews, Brian was unanimously selected to represent his region as a state officer candidate at state convention.
Last year's state convention was one that Brian will never forget. He knew that this was his last chance to make an impact on Kentucky FFA members if he wasn't selected as a state officer.
But Brian's hard work proved him worthy of receiving a Kentucky FFA state officer position. In his year of service, he has truly gone beyond all limits to serve the Kentucky FFA and its members. And now, we would like to introduce to you, giving his retiring address titled One Day,
My Brother,
My Best Friend,
and your Kentucky FFA State President, Brian Chism.
But I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight.
Well, Dr. Guffey, I think I'm finally ready to go. You see, I've been looking forward to this trip for so long now, and I never would have thought that I would be going on a 2-week trip, especially out of the country. I remember you telling me how we were limited on the bags that we could take. So I strategically sat down and thought about how I was going to get all of my belongings I was going to need in those bags without going overweight. Because you told me that if I went over on that weight, I was going to have to pay an extra $100 at the airport. And you can bet I was not about to do that just to get my bags there. But I want to take a minute to make sure that I have all of the necessities with me before we board the plane. So bear with me just for a second. Let's see what we have here. We have sunblock, since we're going to be right on the equator and I don't really want to get burnt. Let's see, some bug spray, because I hear the bugs can be pretty vicious in the rainforest. A change of clothes, so if our luggage was to get lost, because I don't really want to have to be wearing the same shirt for the next 2 weeks. Toilet paper for those unexpected emergencies. And then, let's see, last but not least, my passport. Although I'm looking forward to it, I know I'm going to be ready to come home when the time arrives. Mom, I know, is probably not going to sleep at all while I'm gone, but I'm looking forward to the trip. Well, Dr. Guffey, it's finally that time. It's about time for us to depart. We better get it. 5 hours later, Delta Flight 673 finally landed in Quito, Ecuador. To my astonishment, we actually had running water, electricity, air conditioning, and some really great food. But not too long after being in the capital city, you see, we departed for Moisne, a coastal city, and I saw how life was very different. As we were walking through that city, I saw how the streets were filled with garbage. They were flooded on a daily basis. The homes, they were more like shacks and made out of makeshift pieces of lumber. Animals were running through the street, playing in the garbage, all the while children were right there with them. We began to do our service project at the orphanage, which was putting tooth varnish on the young children, on their teeth to help them. And this project oftentimes brought huge smiles to their faces. But after completing this, I was then informed that we would be eating in this city. And I thought to myself, I'm going to be sick. We proceeded to walk up what was a makeshift piece of lumber and ramps leading into the orphanage, where I sat down at a table similar to this one. And as I sat there, it dawned on me and it hit me what my dad would always tell me when we were little. You see, whenever my sister and I would fight about something, or we would carry on in the show ring, or the dad would ask us to do something, we would complain, and he would always say, I bend over backwards for you, and this is how you're going to act? You do not know how well you have it. And at that moment, as I sat back in the chair, it dawned on me what he truly meant all those years. You see, that orphanage had opened its doors to 23 complete strangers, and I was more concerned about getting sick. The young girl serving us that day attended to our every need, whether that was more food, more water, more silverware, or a napkin. Whatever we asked of her, she jumped and got it for us. But yet I was still concerned about being sick, and they opened their doors to 23 of us. That meal that I really didn't want to eat that day, it actually turned out to probably be one of the very best meals that we had on the trip. The best fish, the best rice, plantain, and yucca. I realized as I sat at that table that it's the little things in life that mean the very most to us. Dr. Coffee always told us, time is irrelevant. Leave your watch at home. You're not going to need it. Now, let me tell you, for a guy like me, that was difficult to get used to. You see, I had always been on a schedule, and if I wasn't on schedule, things weren't good. But one morning, everyone on the trip was getting on the bus. We were packing our bags, getting on the bus, but our bus driver, Louise, was nowhere in sight. Now, Louise was a short, maybe 5'4" tall man, slender as he could be, and spoke absolutely no English. But you can imagine how this was with 23 college kids. We thought Louise spoke perfect English, and we would try to carry on a conversation with him, and he would just kind of stare back at us and smile, a smile that was infectious on that trip. As I sat down on the bus that morning, I realized what Dr. Coffee had meant all those years. Time really is irrelevant. I have vague memories of my grandparents. I remember my grandmother as she lived with Alzheimer's disease for much of her life, and how my grandfather of over 50 years to her, you see, he cared for her every need in any way that he possibly could. But there ultimately came a day when grandmother's condition would no longer allow her to live at home, and she had to be moved to a nursing home. Now that move was difficult on each and every one of us in our family. And it would have been very easy for Grandpa to not travel that 15 miles every day and go sit with her. But Grandpa, being the person he was, he got up early every morning, got in his little Ford Ranger, and drove that windy road to go sit by her bedside and feed her breakfast and lunch every day. Grandpa realized that time was our precious commodity. And as Grandpa, when he wasn't there with her, you could oftentimes find him in this very rocker. At his house, it was a squeaky one at the time, and it still squeaks a little bit this morning. And as I sat there visiting with Grandpa, I would oftentimes ask him, well, Grandpa, what have you been up to these days? And he would always say his signature line, oh, you know, just coodling. For those of you that don't know, that was Grandpa's way of saying taking it easy, enjoying life, and seeing where he ended up one day. Grandpa was a retired farmer, and after he moved to the city of Flaherty, he needed something else to do with his time. So he built a wood shop behind the barn, and he took up woodworking. something that we all love to watch him do. Now, if Grandpa was in the rocker, he was definitely in that little white shop behind the building, building something. It didn't matter if it was a large china cabinet or a chair or a little table like this one. I can recall as a young boy and our entire family going out to the shop and trying to peek and see what Grandpa had been building. All of those goodies, as he called them, as he completed each and every one of them, they would then be taken into his garage in the house, where they would be stored until Christmas time. A time of year that our entire family loved the most. Because Grandpa was a very giving person. All of those goodies that he had made all year, he would give those to his 9 children, ultimately filling their homes with his hard work. My parents' home are filled with some of what he has, and I even have some of it with me in Bowling Green today at school. And it reminds me of the great times that I had with Grandpa. After he passed away, it really dawned on me the impact he had on my life and what the furniture he made meant to each and every one of us. In today's busy world, oftentimes our loved ones are sitting right there beside us, but oftentimes we don't even realize it. We live in the fast lane today, and we spend countless hours scrolling through social media on our phones. But why? Why can't we stop and enjoy our loved ones when they're right there? Get out of that fast lane and leave the watch at home and enjoy life and see where we end up one day. It's often said that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the very first rejection. I'll never forget the very first time that a state officer visited my chapter when I was a freshman in high school. And from that day forward, I knew that I was going to be a state officer. I just knew that I wanted to wear this jacket after my high school days. So in the spring of 2012, the regional interviews finally rolled around, and it was time for me to go and interview. I interviewed, and I just knew that my name, it was going to be called, and I was going to be a state officer candidate. But when the names were called, my name wasn't called. I thought the world had come to an end. What was I going to do? My time of wearing this precious blue and gold jacket, it was coming to an end. But there was something during my freshman year of college that told me that I still had a purpose in this organization. That my time of wearing this blue and gold jacket, it wasn't over. Last June is where this incredible journey all began. You see, a journey that has allowed me to experience my very first plane ride. And buddy, let me tell you, it was interesting to say the least. Or learning how Walt Disney and many other notable people in our country today all have signed their name at our nation's capital behind a shutter. This year, I have met thousands of FFA members from all across this great nation and state. And each and every one of them, each and every one of you here today has helped me tremendously. You see, I'll never forget the terror that I felt when I walked through the door to give my very first workshop by myself. I didn't know if I had enough stuff planned for the time that I had been given. I didn't know how the students would respond or how that day would go. But you see, because of the Marion County FFA chapter, they helped me through that day. They were patient with me, and they showed the grace that I needed that day. They helped me more than I could have ever helped them. You see, they even taught me how to do the proper turtle man call and sign. I never would have thought that I would have done that at convention. Or the day that I walked in to the Thomas Nelson chapter, and I saw a simple sign there in the office, a sign that was welcoming me to their school. And as I stood there that day and I saw it, it dawned on me that in this organization, we truly do have a family that many people don't understand. But that little sign, that can mean the most to each and every one of us. Or take FFA member Kelsey, who believes that this jacket is for everyone. You see, Kelsey takes the time to work with special needs students so that they too can understand what agriculture is all about. Kelsey believes that this blue and gold jacket truly is for everyone, period. One Sunday, as I was sitting in the pew, I heard a verse from Isaiah. Share your bread with the hungry. Shelter the oppressed when you see them. Clothe the naked, and do not turn your back on your own. While I was in Ecuador, I got to meet Jose, a young 10-year-old that had just got out of school and was walking the busy streets of Quito. He wanted to shine our shoes and sell us some trinkets, and as I ate my meal, I began to taste something that just wasn't quite right. You see, it almost tasted like there were twigs in my pasta. And I thought to myself, something is not right here today, which I later found out that was simply rosemary seasoning, and it wouldn't hurt me one bit. Dr. Coffee asked the young boy, "Tenny's hombre, are you hungry?" And Jose responded with sí. Dr. Coffee then told the young boy, "Puedes tener este alimento." You can have this food. And at that very moment, that young 10-year-old that was walking down the busy streets of Quito, Ecuador, that wanted to shine my shoes and sell me some trinkets, he was scarfing down my food. FFA members, we all have a purpose in this life. You see, but we have to take time to nurture those relationships with the people we meet. And all the while, we can't forget what that purpose is. Because one day, things will all turn around. You see, it does not matter the act, how big or how small, the time spent, the money involved, or the sacrifices that we have to make. But what is more important? What is more important is the fact that this is our one time to go beyond what we are used to typically doing. This is our one shot, FFA members, to make an impact on the lives of those individuals that we meet. Because I know one day it'll all turn around.
Organized.
Brian is the most dedicated person that I know to FFA. He travels across the state almost on a daily basis to go meet with FFA members. He is dedicated to FFA 24/7.
This year, Brian has been the team grandpa. Every meeting we've been to, he would constantly be bickering at us, and he would always want to go to bed. He was complaining, "I'm tired, I got to go to sleep," and by now, he's truly embraced that role.
Brian has a dramatic sense and wants everything to be over the top.
Brian has always been
for
the one that
18
keeps
years,
us
you have
all on
loved,
track.
supported,
While
and
some of the
encouraged
guys
me with-
bring comic relief and I bring the sass, Brian's the one that keeps us in line and delegated the tasks so that we could be an efficient team.
Don't tell anyone, but I once saw Brian going 36 in a 35.